Hello and welcome to HealthTech Builders. Here we explore the business of health innovation through real stories from leaders in the trenches, the wins, the failures, and everything in between. You will get insights and practical advice to help you build and lead in health tech. I am your host, Rodrigo Hute. Today, my guest is Harry Kraemer. Harry is a former CEO of Baxter, a multi-billion-dollar global healthcare company, also an executive partner at Madison Dearborn Partners, one of the largest private equity firms in the US, and also, and this is my favorite, he's a professor of leadership and management at Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. And today we'll be exploring what it means to be a values-based leader and how to navigate some current leadership dilemmas from building trust, building culture, making good decisions, and also building personal resilience. So Harry, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Rodrigo.
I am very excited, Harry, to have you on the show today. As you know, I took a couple of your leadership classes at Kellogg when I was pursuing my MBA. And I have to say that your teachings left a lasting and profound impact on me as a leader, as a father, as a husband. And today I am really looking forward to sharing some of these lessons and teachings with our listeners. So thank you so much. Well,
I'm glad to do it. And by the way, Rodrigo, I'm glad you passed because I'm pretty sure you passed. That's all good.
I think I did. Yeah. So Harry, I want to start off by going back to your time at Baxter. And when you look back at your journey to becoming Baxter's CEO, what was the inflection point where you realized that leadership had to be anchored in values rather than just performance metrics?
Yeah, great question, Rodrigo. It's funny, and I talk about this a lot with Kellogg students in the executive MBA and when I'm giving talks to senior people. As you know, Rodrigo, when we all start off as a single contributor and it's kind of all about us, and I think some people make the mistake when you start to lead people, well, I kind of want it to be all about me, right? So if I work for you and you're the leader, I want you to think I'm great and I'm not focused on my team. It's like, wait a minute. As soon as you're a leader, as soon as you have people reporting to you, it's no longer about you. It's no longer about me at all. If I have the ability to attract a great group of people who want to work for me and they're very good, I'm going to do very, very good. But there's this switch you have to almost make of it's no longer about me. Because if it's about you, it's not about the team, and you're not going to attract the really best team.
Was there a single event or a crisis or something that made you realize that you had to evolve your leadership style to becoming a values-based leader? Do you recall something that happened, or you kind of grew up that way?
Well, and as you know, and we talked about this in class, I was very fortunate. What happened to me, actually, while I was at Kellogg, I had the opportunity because the father of my girlfriend specifically told me I was going to go on a 3-day silent Jesuit retreat to really think about what are your values, what is your purpose, what really matters. And in thinking about that, even before, it was like, wait a minute, I'm on this earth for a very short period of time. What difference do I want to make? What are the values? What's your purpose? And so I started off very fortunate as a result of that experience. And I had the opportunity to, as you well know, follow up. And I continue to go on that 3-day silent retreat every single year. And what that really does is it helps me state that it's all about values. It's all about purpose. And interestingly enough, as you well know, Rodrigo, I think you're a good example of it, is if I'm living the values and I'm attracting a great group of people, I will generate a good return. So rather than this, I'll generate a good return and maybe I'll have values. No, by doing this, that helps you generate a great return. It isn't one or the other.
Being a good person, it's good business.
Exactly.
And did you, when you became CEO, did you experience imposter syndrome when you stepped into the CEO role?
Interesting again, Rodrigo, to be honest. No, And the reason for that, and you should challenge us, please challenge all these things. And the reason for that was I figured out very early on, Rodrigo, in my very first managerial job, I've got 8 people reporting to me, and they're young people, and I'm a young guy. Well, the bottom line is, if I'm able to attract, I'll call it 8 really good, could it be 3, could it be 12, but if I've got a team of 8, and they're all 8 really good people, I'm going to do a very good job. So when I ended up moving up, when I was a vice president, I had 8 directors, and they were all 8 very good directors. So when I was the CEO, rather than, oh my goodness, I got imposter syndrome, it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to surround myself with 8 really good people. And I don't have to worry about whether I know everything, Rodrigo, because myself, together with these 8 people, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And so I realized the only time I would have an imposter syndrome, and I know we'll talk about the 4 principles later, is if I've got true self-confidence. I know what I know what I don't know, I surround myself with people that are brighter than me. Why would I pretend I know something I don't know? And by the way, I don't know if this is helpful, Rodrigo, to the listeners, and you got a lot of CEOs that listen to this. A lot of people say to me, oh, but Harry, as you move up, there's a lot more stress. There's a lot more pressure. And I realized I never felt that because every step of the way, as I move into a bigger job, I had 8 really good people that could actually help me. So by the time you're the CEO, well, boy, there's a lot to do. But that's why I've got 8 people that are executive vice president, all of whom are capable of being a CEO, or why are they an executive vice president? So, or if it was like, oh, if you're my boss, oh, I've got to figure this out. Why do I have to figure it out if I've got 8 great people? We will figure it out. So this whole concept of it's not about me, it's about the ability to attract and develop the best team, that's helped me. So I was able to stay away from this whole idea of imposter syndrome.
And if you look back, what advice would today's Harry today in 2025, give the incoming CEO Harry? I don't know how old were you. I think you were in your 40s.
I was 40. Yeah, 41.
Yeah, 40, 41. So what advice Harry today in 2025, what kind of advice would give to the incoming Harry, 41-year-old new CEO, about leadership and being a CEO? I mean, I'm sure that you have more wisdom today than when you were 41. Sure. So is there anything that you would love to tell the 41-year-old Harry?
Yeah, I think it probably would be, Rodrigo, as a result of a little self-reflection. It's not about me. It's never about me. It's developing the best team I possibly can. It's about empowering those people. It's being somebody who cares about every single person. And it's that great quote that I use all the time that I guess, Rodrigo, belongs to Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States. People don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if it isn't about you, and you know how usually, Rodrigo, and we may have talked about this in class, often you look at an org chart and it looks like this where the CEO is at the top of the triangle. And what I realized, what advice I give now is you take that triangle and you literally invert it the other way, okay? I'm the person at the bottom who's helping the executive vice presidents, who's helping the directors, who's helping the line people, who's serving customers. And it is not about me. And creating that environment not only is the right thing to do, it creates a culture where everybody wants to work for you. And it's really funny, Rodrigo. I get a lot of younger students now that'll say, Harry, you must have been this brilliant guy because you were the CFO of a $12 billion company when you were 35, the CEO. And this is not a humility comment, Rodrigo, but I realized I wasn't that bright. I'm not that bright. But I created an environment where I figured out who the really good people were, Rodrigo. And in every job I was in, I tried to create an environment that everybody wants to work for me. And it sounds so ridiculously simple, Rodrigo, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners will realize it, is if you know who the really good people are, and you create an environment that you're going to do phenomenally well. And that's what happened to me.
So let's move on to values-based leadership, and I wanna really dive deep into the framework. And you've written extensively about the 4 principles in value-based leadership, and you actually have a book about it, and you give a lot of talks around the world on it. So could you walk us through the framework and the 4 principles and describe what it means? That would be super helpful.
Sure. And I can give you the 5-hour version now if your listeners want to listen to 5 hours. I'll do the few-minute version. You speed me up, Rodrigo. Because, and you're right, and you remember talking about this, and it's all in that very first book, From Values to Action, which, by the way, is coming out with the second edition next month, okay? Here's the idea. There's 4 principles that drive everything, I think. We've already hinted on the first one, which is self-reflection. Every one of your listeners, Rodrigo, has at least 3 or 4 times the number of things to do than they're possibly going to get done. And rather than going faster and faster and multitasking, the first thing you've got to be able to do is self-reflect, which basically means you take a short amount of time, you turn off all of these things, and you ask yourself a series of questions. What are my values? What's my purpose? What matters? The reason being, you can't possibly lead others if you can't lead yourself. And we can talk more about it if you want to get into it, but that whole concept of I've literally got to be calm enough, reflective enough, be able to prioritize enough that I can lead myself so I can lead others. Self-reflection. The second one is all about balance. Because as you know, Rodrigo, with all the things that are going on in the world, the Ukraine, the Middle East, a lot of the craziness going on in the U.S. politics now, it's very easy for people to have very strong opinions. The problem, Rodrigo, they have strong opinions, but they have very little understanding of perspectives other than their own. And the second principle is a balanced perspective, which basically means, Rodrigo, you take the time to understand multiple perspectives. Or I love to quote St. Francis, I seek to understand before I'm understood. If I'm having a discussion with you, Rodrigo, I try not to say, oh, I don't understand. Because I think that's, if I take the time, I can understand. Then I'll decide, do I agree or disagree, right? Because at the end of the day, if you think the answer is north and I think it's south, even though I'm pretty sure it's south, I want to understand why you think it's north. Why? Because if that makes more sense, I'm just going to say, Rodrigo, forget about north. I have absolutely no reason to be right. I'm incredibly focused on doing the right thing. So I'm happy to change my mind if there's a reason to do it. Balance, perspective. The third one, which I already talked about a little bit, is true self-confidence. I know what I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to admit what I don't know. And it's funny, I had a senior guy last week say to me, you know, Harry, I've read all 4 of the books, and I understand the self-reflection, I understand the balance, but this true self-confidence, Harry, I got a real problem. I said, what's that? He said, well, I got 800 people working for me. I don't want them to know what I don't know. I hold my cards. I'm not going to let them know what I don't know. What do you think about that? And Rodrigo, I'm the guy who's got to explain to this guy. They already know what you don't know. They're wondering whether you know what you don't know, or is this whole ship going to go down? So you're willing to admit it. You're not trying to be right. You're trying to do the right thing. And the fourth one, which is very important to me, is genuine humility. And when I say genuine humility, what it really means, every single person matters. And very often I will ask people, how did you get to where you are? And it's interesting, when I was writing that book, I interviewed 300 people and I said to them, how did you get to where you are? And it's fascinating, Rodrigo. I can be anywhere in the world, low level, intermediate, senior executives, and they'll say, Harry, how did I get to where I am? Harry, I worked very hard to get here, and I have several strengths, skill sets. And I'll say, yeah, but in my case, because I'm self-reflective, I'll add a few other things. How did I get to where I was? Let's not forget about luck. Let's not forget about timing. Let's not forget about the team. Let's not forget about mentors. And some of us from a faith, religious perspective, there's somebody else running the play. And I think you start to realize every single person matters. Every single person matters. And in my view, if on this journey, because it's a journey, if I can become more self-reflective and become more self-aware, develop more of a balanced perspective, have true self-confidence, admit what I don't know, and have enough genuine humility to realize every single person matters, I think I can lead anything. And those 4 principles, Chief, is a 30-hour class, but I just gave you the 3-minute version of it.
That's fantastic. That's a great summary. For anybody who wants to learn more, I encourage you to get the book, Values-Based Leadership in Action. Let me ask you a couple of follow-ups on the first 3 principles. So starting with the first one, self-reflection. You talked about the importance of prioritization. And how do you prioritize, Harry? I mean, once you have a to-do list, it's always endless. So you have to take the time, reflect without distractions, and you have to be kind of relentless at prioritization and making sure that you're focusing on the right thing. Sometimes in practice, it's not that easy. There's always something going on, and people talk about, the difference between the urgent and the important, and there's like 2x2 matrix. How do you prioritize?
Yeah.
Harry?
So the first thing I do, my friend, is I literally sit down with that team of eight people. I'm assuming it's 8. It could be 3, 12. And we literally look at everything that's going on. And how do we figure out the difference between important and urgent? How do we get from what I call the roots to the trees to the forest? Because sometimes people will say, well, what kind of guy is Joe? Well, he's a good guy. He gets a little bit lost in the trees. He doesn't see the forest. Of course, sometimes I'll say there's some people, as you know, they don't even get to the trees. They're in the root system. But that ability to put things into perspective. And if I was sitting next to you, Rodrigo, I would draw a picture of most organizations where it's a series of vertical parallel lines, okay? You could call them divisions, business units, functions, geographies. I'm sure most of the people don't call them, but you could call them silos, Rodrigo. And everybody's looking at this. And at the end of the day, the leaders, if you actually step back and you remember this, you draw a circle around all of those vertical parallel lines and say, all right, we're not trying to optimize any one division or any one function. We're trying to optimize the company. And if we're trying to optimize the company in a very non-emotional way, which of these is going to impact the most in terms of our customers, our profitability, our stock price, all right, quality, if we're in a healthcare or something where quality standards are very, very important. And you've got to trade off. And yet, in my mind, I can't do this myself, all right? That's why I've got this great team of people that is going to help me figure it out. And realizing that if you remember the third book, you're 168, you've only got 168 hours. That's what you got. Or some people would say 24/7, right? Mm-hmm. So if you only got 160 hours in a week, you can't get it all done. What are you going to do and what are you not going to do? So getting that feedback, setting back, being a little self-reflective to put things into perspective as opposed to just jumping around, like a chicken with your head cut off.
Makes total sense. So let me move on to the second principle, balanced perspectives. Would you say in order to be truly balanced in the perspectives, you have to generate a debate? And debate, it's a way of trying to understand different point of views. But ultimately, someone has to make a decision. So you talked about one thing is to understand people's perspectives, but sometimes people just like to create the environment where people can explain their point of view, but sometimes bosses, they already made up their minds anyway. Yeah. So what would you say about that? Like balanced perspective, it's a form of debate.
Yeah. So here we go. You always ask great questions. So here's the way I think about this. And let's always think of the mindset that I'm the leader and I'm sitting down with my team of 8 and you're one of them. What I will do right up front, even before we deal with an issue, I'll set a very clear expectation. And the way it's going to work, Rodrigo, is I'm going to say, hey, gang, we're going to have a lot of issues flying our way. And when we do that, many of us are going to have very different views. So, Rodrigo, here's the way this is going to work. If you've got a view, whether it is similar to mine or it's very different from mine, I want to hear what it is. I seek to understand before I'm understood. I will listen to you folks, but be careful to realize at the end of the day, I will have to make a decision. And let's say you want to go east. I will understand exactly why you want to go east. And by the way, if I decide to go to west, one thing I will always do, I'll always explain to you, Rodrigo, why I'm not doing what you recommended and why I'm doing something else. Because interestingly enough, most people don't believe they have to have their way, but they do have to be respected. Because let's think about it. If you're trying to convince me to go east, and you're spending a week working on this, but I go west, Joe says to you, hey, Rodrigo, you were trying to get Harry to go east. Why is he going west? Let's be honest. In many organizations, your response to Joe is, you think I know? You think I don't know. No, you're going to say, thanks for asking, Joe. Here's why Harry's not going east. Here's why Harry's going west, right? People have to be respected. So I let everybody know. I will listen. I'm happy to change my mind if it makes sense. But guess what? There is this thing called a watch. We have only a certain amount of time, and somebody's going to make a decision, and that's where it's going to be. And by the way, we have a little bit of fun with this, is that, I want to seek opinions, but we got to make a decision. And we're having a little fun with this, Rodrigo, with the younger students. One woman said, well, you must have been a great guy to work for because you're listening and you're willing to change your mind. Well, Harry, you must have been a great guy to work for. And I said, well, Mary, I didn't tell you the whole story. That's only half the story. What's the rest of the story? Well, once I've listened and once I made a decision, Rodrigo, you better get on the bus, pal, or you will be under the bus. right? Because if you come up to me and say, well, I'm not so sure, you know, Rodrigo, I'm not so sure you're employed anymore, okay? Because guess what? Now we got to take the hill. We listen, but at some point in time, we got to make a decision. And you either better get on the bus or you're not going to be around.
Yeah, and what happened? So that's what, you know, the example of disagreeing and committing, right? Sometimes you might not agree, but you have to commit if at the end of the day someone decided to go north and not south.
Yeah.
What happens if you decided to go north and not south, and then a month later you realize that it was the wrong decision?
Fantastic, Rodrigo. See, again, you're very good, because these are all the things, Rodrigo, and as you're listening, so you understand this, these are all the things we're going to talk about before it happens. And what I mean before it happens, in that initial meeting, before we even start, I'm going to say, you tell me your views, I'll make a decision. Now, by the way, team, there'll be times when we're going to make a mistake. There'll be times when I make a mistake. So, Rodrigo, as soon as you realize we've made a mistake, let me know. Why? I have absolutely no need to be right. I'm incredibly focused on doing the right thing. So guess what? If we never make a mistake, almost by definition, we're not taking enough risk, right? Because you're going to have to take a risk. When do we learn the most is when we make a mistake and we fail. So I want to plant the seed up front that we are sometimes going to fail. I am going to make a mistake, all right? And I want you to feel very, very confident of saying, hey, geez, Harry, I know that's what we decided to do, but here's all the reasons why we need to change, and it's not going to work.
So moving on to the third principle, which is true self-confidence. You talked about having the confidence of saying the things that you do know, and also being open to saying, like, I don't know about this, right? Yeah. But sometimes, like, what if what you don't know, when you show or say that you don't know something, could reflect badly on you? So in this case, you were the CEO, but let's imagine that you're the VP reporting to the CEO. Yeah. You're in a meeting, and then you don't know about a particular topic, or you don't know enough about something that is going on in the company or whatever it may be. Don't you think that being too open about not knowing something could potentially backfire somehow?
Yeah. So again, Rodrigo, always push me. Honest opinion, no, I don't think so. And the reason for that, here's another example of that setting expectation thing right up front. Right up front, if you're my boss, I'm going to let you know, way beyond words. Rodrigo, you're my boss, pal. I'll never let you down. I'll do a great job. You can count on me. And by the way, Rodrigo, if I don't know, I'm not going to pretend I do. But I'll tell you what, my friend, anything you want to know, I have a fairly amazing network. If I don't know, I'll get you an answer pretty quick. And what's very interesting, remember I laid out this model that leadership has nothing to do with titles and org charts. And the reason I don't even need any slides, Rodrigo, if you may remember, the leadership model is 3 words: leadership, influence, relate. Leadership, influence, relate, right? Because if I can relate, you can be 5 levels above me. If I can relate to you, I can influence you, and I can lead you, regardless. Now, if the model is leadership, influence, relate, think about this. If you're my boss and I don't know something, what am I worried about? I'm worried you may not think I'm one of your best people, right? But if I say, I don't know, but I'll get you an answer pretty quick, how are you going to react to that? My guess is you may say to yourself, oh, I don't know everything. Harry's going to get me an answer, and I can relate. Well, think about it. Leadership, influence, relate. Most people, Rodrigo, do not relate well to people who know everything. Most people don't relate well to people who never make a mistake. And so as long as I say, I got an amazing network, I'll get you an answer pretty quick, I think you're going to feel pretty good about that, as opposed to faking it. And by the way, think about people you know, Rodrigo, or your listeners know, who don't want to admit they don't know. It's very heavy. It's like carrying a very, very heavy thing around. No, I don't know, but I'll get you an answer pretty quick. And by the way, I had a boss, since a lot of your folks are CEOs, you'll appreciate this one, Rodrigo. Turns out when I was the CFO of Baxter, the chairman of the board called me, and I've only been the CFO for a couple months. And he called me into his office and he said, I'm starting to look at the next CEO. You're one of them, but there's at least 5 other guys. But here's what I'm wondering. Most human beings, before they get promoted, they think they need to know everything about that next job, or they're not really qualified. So Harry, here's the question for you. If you need to know everything about being the CEO before you got in the job, how long would it take you? I said, Mr. Graham, I only know about half of this CFO job, but I'll figure it out. He said, well, I do know. I've been watching you for 3 months now. In your case, If you needed to know everything about being the CEO before you got in the job, you would be about 185 years old. But I got great news for you. And by the way, Rodrigo, this is true for you and true for everybody. He said to me, any job you're in the rest of your life, there's only two things you ever need to know in any job. I said, what's that, Mr. Ray? He said, the first thing you have to know, what are you really good at? What are your God-given gifts? What do you bring to the party? What are you good at? He said, Harry, the only other thing you have to know is who knows what you don't know. I said, Mr. Graham, this is going to work out perfect. I got about 50 guys who know what I don't know, and I might as well tell them I don't know because they already know I don't know. So it's this true self-confidence thing, and I find it's to be kind of humorous because people are saying, geez, I don't know if I want to tell them I don't know. They already know you don't know, okay? They're wondering whether you know what you don't know. That's why we call it true self-confidence.
Thank you for clarifying that. You also talk a lot about the discipline of values-based leadership, and you describe values-based leadership as almost as training a muscle, like a discipline training a muscle. So what are some of the daily or weekly practices that have helped you strengthen these muscles over the decades?
Yeah.
What are some examples of putting this into action and building habits, real habits?
Yeah. So as you probably know, Rodrigo, the thing that probably impacted my life more than anything else was having the opportunity when I was a student at Kellogg to go on a 3-day silent retreat with my girlfriend's father, where silent retreat, it's hard for me to keep quiet, as you can imagine, but a 3-day retreat where they literally ask you to think about what are your values, what's your purpose, what matters. 3-day silent retreat, no phones, no gadgets, no laptops, no nothing. And at the end of the 3 days, and I went on this when I was at Kellogg, they said this shouldn't be a one-time occurrence. You should spend 15 minutes a day doing a personal self-examination. So what I do every day, Rodrigo, is at the end of the day, I'm not a morning guy, so it's usually at night, midnight, I go through the following exercise. What did I say I was going to do today? What did I actually do? What am I proud of? What am I not proud of? How did I lead people? How did I follow people? If I lived today over again, what would I have done differently? And then the last one, Rodrigo, is if I have tomorrow, knowing fully well sooner or later I won't, based on what I learned today, how will I operate differently tomorrow? On whatever dimension of your life has any significance. And the students will say, well, do you do this every day? I do this every day. It's 15 minutes. If I said I do it for half an hour, I could easily argue I don't have hard to argue I don't have 15 minutes, right? I'm not that busy. And then the students will say, well, do you have to write it down? You don't have to, but I write a few notes down in my journal every night. Why? If I don't write anything down, am I self-reflecting? Am I daydreaming? Particularly if you and I have shared a bottle of wine. It could get a little messy in terms of what I'm thinking about, right? And by the way, the end of the story is that I married this fellow's daughter, and for the last now 45 consecutive years, Rodrigo, wherever I am in the world, I'm usually out of the country a week, month, I go on this 3-day silent retreat in St. Paul, Minnesota with my 93-year-old father-in-law. Okay. It's the 3 most important days for me. And the way, when you talk about discipline, Rodrigo, think about every listener here. Every business, you've got a strategic plan, right? And then you got your operational plan. And what occurred to me 45 years ago, why wouldn't you do the same thing for yourself? So once a year, and it gets personal because it depends on the person, the question, the person. But for me, once a year, I've got 3 days, no distractions, no phones, no whatever, and ask myself over the next year, how can I be a better spouse, a better father, a better leader, a better Christian, a better teacher, a better person? And then I do a little 15-minute check-in. How am I doing? And you mentioned it. There's 4 words. You mentioned one of them that drive me. Discipline, focus, consistency, credibility. I've got to be disciplined. I have to stay focused. And if I do it consistently, I start to establish a little credibility with myself, and I can have credibility with other people. But that's the way it works, my friend. That's the way it works. It has an enormous impact. And the reason it's so helpful is that most people, and most of the people listening to this, if we're honest, Rodrigo, from time to time, what do you deal with? Worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress. And I asked the executive the other day, what do you know about worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress? Well, waste of time, unproductive, not healthy. But if you wait until bad things happen, it's too late. So what I convinced myself as a result of my self-reflection, Rodrigo, and I'm very sincere about this, I decided many years ago, no matter what happens, Rodrigo, picture your worst nightmare. No matter what happens, I will do two things. Number one, with a lot of people's help, I'll try to do the right thing. Number two, I'll do the best I can do. And if you can actually come to grips with that, because you have to say, I say it 5 times a day, if I can convince myself that no matter what happens, I'll try to do the right thing, I'll do the best I can do, I would argue, Rodrigo, worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress can be significantly reduced. You can never eliminate them. Welcome to the real world. And our bosses sometimes, Rodrigo, or our boards would say, Rodrigo, a little bit of stress and pressure is not all bad. The problem is we got a lot more than a little bit. And that ability then, on all the boards I'm on, of all the activities I'm on, giving leadership talks for companies, I'll try to do the right thing. I'll do the best I can do. And I literally have virtually no time for worry, fear, anxiety, pressure, and stress. And I would argue every one of the listeners here, they don't have time either, okay? Because it's a waste of time. And that's where the discipline, focus, consistency, and credibility come in.
I love it. I love it, Harry. Let me ask you a question about AI. Artificial intelligence. It seems that AI is democratizing expertise. And earlier you touched on this, that one of your former bosses asked you, like, what are you really good at? What are you really, really good at? And would it be fair to say that becoming a better leader, it's becoming more important than developing financial, marketing, or any other functional expertise? Now with AI, it seems that literally AI is democratizing expertise, and anybody can have access to the best financial models or marketing strategies or accounting practices or whatever, with AI tools. So I just feel that becoming a better leader and a better person could be a potential differentiator. But what do you think? How do you think AI is also changing expertise?
Yeah. Well, again, Rodrigo, I give you a lot of credit. You ask super good questions, and this one comes up a lot lately. So here's the way I think about this. Before AI, there was this perspective of, hey, I got to get these hard skills. I don't like these terms, but it usually becomes these hard skills: accounting, finance, marketing, operations, okay, IT. And then over time, if you're really good at all of that, well, then you get to start to move towards some of these softer skills: leadership, prioritization, people development, etc. And I would argue, to your point, the hard skills now, it's much easier to figure that out because I can rely on AI to help me with all of that. But at the end of the day, that puts even a bigger role on leadership. Are you the kind of person that can develop people's leadership skills? Can you motivate them? Can you help them figure out what kind of person they want to be? And are they the kind of person who other people are going to want to work for, right? And that's where I think the caring comes in, the development. So I would argue this becomes less a question of how bright you are. It becomes less a question of how good you are in terms of hard skills. Are you the kind of person, I know it sounds simple, are you the kind of person that people really want to work for? And again, when the younger students will say to me, well, geez, Harry, you must have been really, really bright, I always tease people to say, no, I really wasn't. But beyond AI, I took the time to figure out that comment again, people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And I don't really believe AI is going to help figure out how much you care, all right? And they're going to run all the models for you. They'll figure out your weighted average risk-adjusted after-tax cost of capital in about 3 seconds, okay? But I don't think that's going to help you manage a team or develop a team. So that's the way I think about it. I view AI as something done the right way will enhance your ability to focus more on what really matters, which is the whole people side of things.
So what new skills or set of skills would you be spending more of your time on if you were a mid-level or a senior level executive in the current environment? Let's say you go back and you're 40 years old again.
Yeah.
And in 2025, where would you be spending your time to develop new skills and continue growing?
So here's the way, and by the way, great question again, because I did this with a group of 50 CEOs not long ago down in Miami. And one of them said, Harry, how should we spend our time? And you should challenge us, Rodrigo. But I said, here's at the end of the day, there's two things I think you need to focus on. One word is people, and the other word is communication. The word people stands for attracting, recruiting, developing, providing feedback, not a once-a-year deal, but open, honest, continuous, transparent feedback, retention, the people equation, right? The second word is communication. And in the case of Baxter, I would say, how do you make sure that all 55,000 people understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, whether they're accounts receivable clerk in Buenos Aires or they're a manufacturing guy in Munich? How do they make sure they understand what they do fits into what Baxter's trying to accomplish overall? And I had a senior guy, a very senior guy said, all right, Harry, people plus communication. What percentage of your time do you think you should spend on those two? And I said, well, honestly, I believe it's about 90%. And two guys said, wait a minute, you said we could challenge it. Harry, wait a minute. If you're spending 90% of your time on people and communication, Harry, respectfully, when do you get the work done? And I had to use that famous English word if. If I've got all the right people, not some, if I've got all the right people, Rodrigo, and everybody knows exactly what we need to do and why, what else is there to do? What else is there to do? The problem, Rodrigo, and I'm sure you see this with your career, you know this, most people do not have the right people. Most people are not developing the right people. Many leaders are saying, oh, I'd love to communicate, I don't have the time. And I always immediately say, as a leader, if the only thing you've got time to do is to make sure that everybody on the team knows what we're trying to do, you're going to do phenomenally well. Phenomenally well. Okay? So get your act together. Make sure you're developing the people, not just this feedback, open, honest, continuous, transparent feedback so that everybody knows where they stand. And if they're the wrong person, in a respectful way, help them find a job someplace else, maybe even a different company.
At Baxter, you often had to balance different stakeholders. You had to deal with patients and employees and providers and shareholders and regulators and so on. And sometimes, interests do not always align. Stakeholders have different interests and motivations and so on. What was your framework for making decisions when values collided with financial or operational pressures?
Yeah. I'm smiling, Rodrigo, because this is one of my favorite questions. I get asked this by CEOs all the time, and they're telling me, oh my God, these are all in conflict, and how do you manage them or whatever? And my opinion, remember I said no answers, many opinions. My opinion is I don't think there's as much conflict as you would think. And here's the example I would use. Oh my goodness, but I got to deal with my team. I don't use the word employees. I got my team, my customers, my suppliers, society, shareholders. How do I differ these? And they're in conflict with shareholder value. Well, here's my opinion. And Rodrigo, you should really challenge this because I'd love to be challenged. Here's the way I look at it. If I'm the CEO of Baxter, I am very comfortable with the fact if the stock price, pick a number, is $35 a share, I better figure out a way to generate a return. Why? As you well know, Rodrigo, why are people paying $35 a share for the stock? They want their children to go to college. They want to buy a home. They want to retire. So I am very comfortable with the fact I've got to generate a return. But here's the magic formula for me. Step back. Let's say you and I are in the company. How do we generate shareholder value? How do we generate it? Well, I would argue there's only two things we need. The first thing we need is great people, not good people. We need great people. Well, as you and I know, Rodrigo, particularly the younger generation now, I've got 5 children. They're not going to work for a company that's not socially responsible, that's not thinking about the environment, that isn't trying to do the right thing. So by doing the right thing, by saying we care about the client, and this, by the way, this is not greenwashing, but guess what? We're going to give our employees a day off once a quarter to do Habitat for Humanity or do a soup kitchen or whatever. If we can say we're going to do the right thing and live the right thing, we're going to generate great people. Okay, check that box. We got great people. Now, the only other thing we need is we need customers. Okay? Now, let's assume that Joe is a customer. Joe can buy the product from me or he can buy the product from you. Okay? Now, if all I'm focused on is shareholder value, show me the money, greed is good or whatever, and you say, well, I want to generate a return, but I care about my team members. I am focused on the environment, and I want to do the right thing. I actually think Joe, if the quality's close, the price, I think he's going to buy the product from you. So here's a simple formula. If by doing the right thing, and the way you and I think about the right thing, I've got a great team, I got a great relation with customers, I'm going to generate a good return. Okay? Or as an old math major, remember, there's independent and dependent variables. Shareholder and the stock price, that's the conclusion. Okay? I think a lot of companies, unfortunately, Rodrigo, they start with, we're going to increase the stock price, and they're not treating people well. They're not being socially responsible. They're taking advantage of customers. They're jacking up the price for a short-term benefit, and they create a real problem. So, and in my mind, I fit these things very well together. By doing the right thing, I generate a great team, a great relationship with customers, and I'll generate a great stock price. So this whole idea of, oh, I've got this massive conflict, I don't think of it that way. It's my opinion.
I want to ask you a question about hiring and team building. So you talk a lot about the importance of having the right team and the difference between a great team and a good team and so on. But if you were hiring executives today in 2025, I mean, would your approach be different from what you used to at Baxter? What are some of the critical factors that you would consider at hiring today? And maybe it hasn't changed. Maybe your approach to hiring is the same as when you were a CEO.
Yeah.
But just wondering if there's any key considerations to share today with listeners, and also how do you view the difference between great people and good people?
Yeah.
As well.
So here's the way I think about it, my friend, and I kind of base it on the four principles that you and I were talking about before: self-reflection, balanced perspective, true self-confidence, and genuine humility. So I'll just role play. When I'm interviewing you for a job, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. But what I'm trying to figure out on my little sheet of paper as I'm talking to you are the following. How self-reflective is this guy? How self-aware is he? Does he think it's all about him and his ego? Or is he somebody who's comfortable in his own skin? Does he have a balanced perspective? Does he seek to understand? Is he willing to change his mind? Is he willing to admit that with true self-confidence that he knows what he knows and he doesn't have to know everything, and he admits when he doesn't? Does he realize every single person matters, that it's not about him? And if I can find people on all the boards that I'm hiring for, the companies I'm involved with, that's what I did 30 years ago. That's what I would do today. Now, what's the difference today versus the past? I think it's a good one. I would say, my friend, particularly given the younger generations, particularly given everything that happened with COVID, and now we've got the remote and hybrid and so on. I think of the number of companies where the CEO is in other part of the country from the rest of the team or whatever. I would say that you've got to ramp up this communication and demonstrating your ability to truly, leadership, influence, relate, truly be able to relate to every person. And I'll give you a really good example, Rodrigo. Somebody said to me, hey, Harry, I've read all 4 of the books. I realize the way you think about this people thing. So, Harry, I've got 10 people. Harry, they're scattered around the country. And every Friday, no matter what, I get all 10 of them together, and we're going through results. We're on the phone together and so on. Harry, do you think that really helps? Remember, I always say opinion, not answer. I'd say, well, Joe, that's a nice meeting for Friday. You need to have it because we need 4 hours. But you know what? The way I look at it, sometime between Monday and Thursday, I will call those 10 people individually and check in with them. So when I call you on Monday or Tuesday, Rodrigo, the conversation is going to go, hey, Rodrigo, we're going to go through the numbers on Friday. We're going to go through the market share. You know what I want to do? I want to take 10 minutes right now today. Rodrigo, how are you doing? How are you doing? How do you feel? I think you mentioned last time we talked, you're a single parent with a 5 and a 6-year-old. How are the kids? Can I help you with anything? Is there anything I can help you with? All right. Then I call Bill. Hey, Bill, I think you told me that you've got an 85-year-old grandfather that needs some help. Is that something that you can actually, can we help? Can the company help in some way? All right. In other words, I want you to know I truly care about each and every one of you. I care deeply about each and every one of you. And by the way, if that happens, we're going to do phenomenally well. And I think now there's much more of a need to demonstrate to people, because you may not see them very often. So, and that's that comment again, that Teddy Roosevelt quote I must quote every single day. People do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when they know how much you care, they'll do absolutely anything for you.
Harry, let me challenge you a little bit here, and I wanted to ask you like how many, and I believe that your approach is awesome, and that's why I've been like going to your classes, reading all your books and so on. But how many CEOs actually think like you?
Not many. Not many, Rodrigo, which, by the way, that's why I teach this. I teach this because I happen to believe, my opinion, and please challenge me, I think the world would be a lot better off if we had more value-based leaders. Which, by the way, Rodrigo, the reason the challenge is good is that you could say to yourself, I get this from students, they'll say, well, Harry, but there's a lot of people that are leaders that they're not value-based. They're ego-driven. They're narcissists or whatever. And I said, well, you know what? Yes. But I happen to believe the world would be much better off if we had more value-based leaders. Now, to have a little bit of fun with this, Rodrigo, remember, we always have to have a little bit of fun. One student said, you know what? I read the book on Steve Jobs. I read the whole thing about Elon Musk. I mean, these guys have been very successful, and they're not value-based. So, Harry, maybe I don't need to do that. And I teased them, and I said, you know, I know people that work for Steve Jobs. I know people who work for Elon Musk. What I have heard is that they realize these people are not value-based, but they're so unique. They're not 1 in a million. They're probably 1.5 billion people. And because of that, people are willing to put up all kinds of crap because it's such a unique experience. So I said to this one fellow, Steve, I said, Steve, you know, I've been reading all your papers. I don't think you're going to be the next Steve Jobs. I really don't. So maybe you may want to think about this value-based leadership thing. It may be your way to handle this. So
That's a fair point. And actually, this leads me to my next point, which is like many leaders today say they don't have enough time to coach and develop people. You know, today's large medium organizations want managers to lead more direct reports, and with AI and companies want managers to be more productive. Let me give you an example. Amazon is asking their managers to lead 20 people instead of 10 people, just to give you just an example. So what managers are saying, and I have some friends that work at these companies, and they've been telling me, I just don't have time to be a values-based leader. I don't have time to coach, to listen. I just need to deliver the number because I have so much things to do. So what's your advice for creating a culture of coaching when calendars are already full with so many things?
Yeah, well, and again, just like you challenge me, I'll challenge you. See, if I'm a leader and I've got 20 people working for me, it's not like I've got to do a lot of things and I've got to develop 20 people. I would argue all I have to do is develop 20 people. That's all I have to do. Because those 20 people can get the job done, okay? My role is not to do the job. My role is to develop those people. And if I've got 20 out of 20, well, then things are going to go really, really well. In fact, think of it this way. Here's my observation. Let's say somebody's got 8 people reporting to them. I have visited hundreds of companies, hundreds. Here's my observation. You may have seen this, Rodrigo, maybe you haven't. The average leader with 8 direct reports, my observation, at least 2 of those 8 are the wrong people. They're just the wrong people. So let's say you're the leader and you got 8 people. And I don't know why, but 2 of them, they're not the right people. But you have trouble dealing with it. You have trouble being open and you want to be liked, whatever it is. So now you work for me. Interestingly enough, you're not going to let me down. So what are you going to do? You're going to do the work of the 2 people that aren't performing very well, which is a problem because the 6 really good people aren't going to get any development because you're doing the job of those 2 people that aren't. All right? And by the way, the other problem is because you're stuck doing the work of I'm your boss, you have no time to actually help do my job. So if I look at the 10, 12 jobs I was in at Baxter, every job I was ever in, Rodrigo, I made sure I had 8 out of 8, 10 out of 10, 12 out of 12. What's the benefit of that? If I've got 10 out of 10 and I'm delegating to them and you're my boss, half of my time is doing your job. I got to tell you, Rodrigo, this is a good lesson for people. Every time I got promoted, I was already doing half the job of my boss. Why? Because I had the 10 out of 10 or the 20 out of 20. See, the mistake people are made, and the comment you made is, oh, geez, I got to do all of this stuff and I got to develop 20 people. No, the only thing you have to do is develop 20 people because they're going to do the job. And then you can figure out what your boss needs to do so you can spend some time helping him. Okay? That's why I said before, what's 95% of the job? It's the people and the communication. It's not about how much you're doing. It's, are you developing the people to get the job done? It's my opinion.
So Harry, there is a number of dilemmas that CEOs, C-level execs are grappling with today, in 2025. So let me mention 3 or 4 of those, and I would love to get your opinion on these topics. The first one is around trust and transparency. So in 2025, trust in healthcare institutions,
Yeah.
companies and leaders is at historic lows. So you faced, as CEO, you faced recalls and public scrutiny at Baxter. What did you learn about rebuilding credibility when the public assumes the worst?
Yeah. What that's all about, my friend, is you building the credibility in a very, very simple way. When there's a crisis, and by the way, having been through a lot of them, it's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. And every one of your listeners, if they haven't been through a crisis, buckle up, because you will. And you will either get completely overwhelmed by it, or you'll figure out a way to be amazing communicators in how to deal with it. And here's the little formula. It sounds simple, but I think it's this simple. When a crisis occurs, like the ones I had at Baxter, number 1, you tell people exactly what you know to be true and why. Number 2, you tell people what you don't know and why you don't know it yet. And number 3, you tell them how quickly you'll get back to them with what you didn't know in number 2. What does that do? People realize the guy's being honest. He's admitting what he doesn't know. He's not making it up. I trust this guy. As opposed to making stuff up, making assumptions, and confusing the heck out of people. All right? And so nothing is more important than building up the trust. And if people realize you have absolutely no ulterior motive than to do the right thing, it'll make an enormous impression on how you're able to operate. But some people, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like, the other thing that's crazy. When things are going well, we communicate like crazy. And as soon as there's a problem, let's shut down the communication. I would argue from a communication standpoint, and I've included this in a lot of the books, Rodrigo, however much you communicate when things are going well, you should be communicating 3 times more often when things aren't. You're not hiding behind something. You're not waiting for something. You'll let people know, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's how fast I'll get back to you with what I didn't know. Has an enormous impact on your credibility.
It seems to me that there is a thin line between being 100% transparent and telling everything that you know about a particular issue and sharing enough to the public. Some leaders feel that just sharing a little bit of, being honest, but just sharing a little bit, but not the full story is the right way to go. Versus just being 100% honest with exactly what's going on as the right approach. So,
well, the reason I'm smiling is, Rengo, one of the things I learned a lot from my grandfather who lived with us when I was growing up. And the only reason you would think you wouldn't tell everybody everything, there's this view of, maybe I can keep some things a secret, right? And one of my grandfather's lines, and he had a lot of them. If you remember, I mentioned some of them in class. One of his great lines was, Harry, there are no secrets. And he said, well, you know what? Maybe 2 people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. Okay. So the idea that you're going to hide something from somebody, what are you talking about? And by the way, if this was true maybe 10, 20 years ago, but Rodrigo, look at this little device. Okay. As a result of this little puppy, okay, this little puppy right here, okay, this iPhone, people know within 10 seconds of what really happened, and they've got all the pictures now. So this whole idea of, let's not tell anybody anything today. Well, let's wait till tomorrow. Forget about it. They already know, and they wonder why you didn't tell them.
Yeah. So the second dilemma, and you already touched on this earlier, but, it's about this kind of workforce, remote hybrid culture that is going on nowadays. And at Baxter, you had, physical workforce in labs, factories, hospitals, in, headquarters and so on. But today leaders are struggling with hybrid and remote teams. So how would you build a values-based culture when people aren't in the same room? Let's assume for a second that you can have everyone in the same building.
Yeah. So we kind of hinted upon this one before. Best of all worlds is to have everybody together, always be together. If you don't, then you better have the kind of meetings I'm talking about where you stay close enough to the people so it's almost as if you were with them. That's why that example I gave you with the 10 people, we'll get together, but I'm going to spend time with each person individually to let them know how much I care, to let them know they're part of the team. Because the ability to make people realize that you care and you understand and you're listening, nothing could be more powerful than that. And so I would argue you try to find times when you can get everybody together, but if you can't, you better figure out ways to stay in touch with people. And my view would be you better figure out at some point to get people together, because some of these companies are saying, well, we'll work remote 100% of the time. Well, my opinion, not sure how you develop leaders if all you're seeing them is on a Hollywood Square Zoom thing, okay? How do you build a team if they spend no time together? So if you're going to build a culture, if you're going to build teams, at some point in time you need to get together. You may not be able to do it very often, but you better figure out some way to do it, once or twice a year, or I don't know how you build effective teams.
True. And the other dilemma that I hear a lot, not only from CEOs, but also team members, employees, and so on, it's burnout, stress, and turnover. And you already touched on this earlier, but it's a reality that a lot of people feel a lot of pressure to deliver. A lot of people feel stress. Not everyone has the privilege of having Harry as their boss, right? So it's a reality that sometimes we all have to deal with bad bosses or companies that do not have great cultures. So it's a reality, not only today in 2025, but it's just a reality that I see everywhere. Yes. So what can you do? I mean, what can you do as a CEO, but also what would you do if you were an employee at that company in that culture? Because you cannot change jobs just like that. I mean, you could, but at the same, I just feel that if you're in the right environment and you have the right boss, then things are definitely way easier, but sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah, so, and when it's not the case, you have to figure out, in my mind, what are your values, what's your purpose, what matters. And now you're in a situation where the company, like you said, doesn't have those. Well, then I think you have to ask yourself, do you have the ability to, since it's leadership influence relate, can you lead up, can you influence, can you change the culture, can you change what's going on? If you're really a leader, can you have an impact on that? And if you can't, and I would argue if it violates your views and your values, then you may not be able to move out right away because of the environment and unemployment, but you better figure out as soon as the environment improves to get out of there, or I don't know how you can live your values, right? Because what people get confused about values, my friend, is sometimes they get confused between values and preferences. You may have a preference for something, but if it's a value, two things related to values, Rodrigo. One, you'll never compromise, and two, you won't negotiate. Because if you're willing to negotiate and you're willing to compromise, then I don't think it could be a value.
So final question, Harry, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about values, different values and so on. And if you could leave one principle of values-based leadership to the next generation of healthcare CEOs and our listeners, what would it be?
I would say you're very busy. You can easily be overwhelmed. You may try to go faster and faster. You may try to multitask. But if you're going to be a successful leader, you better take the time to pause, turn off all these devices, get off by yourself, and ask yourself some very simple questions that I have in all these classes, all these books. What are my values? What is my purpose? What matters? What kind of a leader do I want to be? What kind of example do I want to set, right? We're on this earth for a very short period of time. Is it all about you? Is it about ego? Is it about or is it, I want to make a difference, the short time I'm on this earth? That's sort of the way I think about it, Chief. And again, just to be helpful to folks, and you can make a note of this for folks. My students actually set up a website a couple of years ago, and I said, hey, I'm old enough, I don't need a website. And they said, no, we'll set this up for you. All we want you to do is every Tuesday morning, you send out 400 or 500 words on all the types of questions you're asking me, Rodrigo. So anybody can get a hold of all these questions and these every week by looking at the website, harrykraemer.org. And by the way, since it's always Tuesday, every Tuesday, you can follow me on LinkedIn every Tuesday. And you know what, Rigo? It's exactly the questions that we're talking about. And if people go to that harrykraemer.org, I respond to every question. I respond to people. That's what I love to do because I happen to have this bizarre old-fashioned view, Rodrigo. The world would be a lot better off if we had more value-based leaders.
Absolutely. I love your blog. I read your articles every week, and that's one great way for me to keep learning as well. So Harry, thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experience with all of us. And I wish you all the best. And thanks for doing this and continue to spread the word and your expertise with everybody.
Thank you, my friend. Always good seeing you, and you take good care. We'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you so much.